What's going on, guys? It's Nick from Arch City Poker, and in today's video, going to be continuing the How to Beat Live Low Stakes Poker series. Today's topic is going to be 3-betting, and a topic that I've had some requests for, a part of the game that I think many players misunderstand. They play poorly in 3-bet pots, and it all starts with, I think, a lack of understanding of why they are 3-betting pre-flop. And I think a lot of players don't know when and why they should be 3-betting. So I'm going to kind of get into that and try to keep this, pretty short and sweet as usual for the sake of everybody's time. So why are you 3-betting? That's the question that should be running through your mind when you face an open raise. There are 3 reasons, in my opinion. It's going to be for value as a bluff, or to usually isolate a player to try to get the pot heads up. And that's usually going to be a player that's of a much less skill level. So there are 2 different strategies that I think should be used when you're 3-betting. Now, when I say should be used, these are the 2 strategies that you can use. I'll kind of get into why it might be better to simplify your strategy a little bit if you don't know the players at your table as well, but we'll get into that at the end of the vlog here. So the first strategy you can use is going to be a polarized 3-betting strategy. Now, if you guys aren't too familiar with the word polarization and what it means in poker, basically it's just hands that are at the very top of your range and then hands that are at the bottom, pretty much. So, for example, let's say a tighter player opens in middle position and I have pocket aces in position. Obviously, a hand that's at the very top of my range, a hand that I will 3-bet for value. Now, if this player is going to overfold and he will not try to call you too much in these 3-bet pots from out of position, then you probably want to use this polarized strategy. Now, why you're doing this and how you exploit him is you want to take your hands that are at the very top of your range and obviously 3-bet them for value, like aces, kings, maybe queens will fit in here. Maybe ace-king, that's kind of iffy or dependent, but let's just say for now we'll just say aces and kings just to keep it simple. If your opponent is only going to continue a small percentage of the time with his range, and it's going to be obviously hands that are going to be near the top of his range but aren't like aces or kings, then it wouldn't make sense to 3-bet him with a hand like pocket tens. Because if your opponent's only going to continue with queens or jacks, then it doesn't make sense to bloat the pot and get him to call with only better. Now, like I said, if he's only going to have a small percentage of the time that he continues, then if he's overfolding, you're going to want to use hands that you can get value out of that probably aren't profitable to call his open with. So hands that are probably just barely not callable. So I would say hands like king 8 suited, king 7 suited, king 6 suited, queen 7 suited possibly, some baby suited aces. These hands are often not the best hands to call with pre-flop. And you get a lot of value out of them by 3-betting because your opponent's going to fold most of the time. So you're getting value out of a hand that really has no value post-flop. Now, the reason that you want to choose these high disconnected suited hands is that they do have some decent playability post-flop. They can flop top pair. They can flop pretty strong draws. So they're not the worst hands ever. So I would suggest not 3-betting like aces and kings, and then 3-betting hands like 8-3 suited or 6 deuce offsuit. You probably still want to have a suit and have a high card in there a lot of the time. Now, if your opponent just folds his entire range except for like aces, kings, and queens, then you can pretty much use any card you want. But the whole point is, if your opponent is only going to continue with a very small percentage of his opening range, and that's going to be hands that are near the top of his range, then it makes sense to only use hands that are going to either be better for sure, or hands that can't profitably call him and get some value out of getting some immediate folds pre-flop. So that is the polarized strategy. It definitely works a little bit better in position, I believe, because players will just be folding more often to your 3-bet when they're out of position. Now, as far as the second strategy, a more linear strategy, this will often work better when you're out of position. So, players will feel much more comfortable calling your 3-bets in position. So I think you should be using a more linear range, which will mean basically like the top of your range and then hands that are good, that are, in like the top half or like getting close to the top of your range. So I don't know, that sounded a little confusing to me, but like let's say like aces, kings, like we had before with your polarized range, but then instead of hands like king 6 suited or queen 5 suited, you're going to have hands like king queen suited or ace 10 suited, ace jack offsuit maybe. More of those like good, bigger aces, good broadways, especially suited broadways will work well. So that will definitely work better when you're, say, for example, 3-betting from the blinds against a late position raiser. It also works really well against loose opponents. So when we were talking about our polarized strategy against a tight opponent who will often overfold to 3-bets, if you have an opponent that's hardly ever folding to a 3-bet, then obviously they're calling you with a wider range. And a lot of their hands like ace 10, king 9 suited, those are going to dominate a lot of your hands that you would use in a polarized strategy, like king 6 suited or ace 7, for example. So you're going to want to have just better hands, a more linear range overall, if that makes sense. So you start adding in stuff like pocket jacks down to maybe pocket 8s, and then like your suited broadways, more of your big aces, and that should work out pretty well for you. Now, as far as we talked about if you have maybe a read on the opponent, like it's a tighter opener or a loose opener, or really depending on like what their continuing ranges are, how do these opponents continue against 3-bets, that should really decide which of these two strategies that you really use more often than not. But if you don't know your opponent and you're kind of just going by default, I tend to prefer a linear strategy in these live low stakes games. I think a lot of players, they don't come to the casino to fold. When they open, they will basically not want to fold, and they'll want to see a flop no matter what. And they're willing to see flops with good hands like Jack 10 suited and King Queen offsuit. They're not going to want to fold too much. So I prefer a linear strategy. I think it also helps because it gets pots heads up more often in these games. Whereas and I know a lot of you guys and a lot of players in live low stakes games, they complain about every pot being multi-way and you can't bluff multi-way. Well, you can heads up, and a lot of times these players are going to make the same types of mistakes in 3-bet pots that they will in single raise pots. So why not bloat the pot and get them to make these mistakes for a more expensive price and allow you to make more money? So I would definitely say by default, if you want to start adding more 3-bets into your range, maybe if let's say you go to play soon here, instead of ace jack suited, maybe a hand that you always flat, maybe start turning that into a 3-bet and trying to isolate a bad player and get them heads up maybe, and see how that works out. I think players do not 3-bet often enough in these games, and I think you guys should start considering adding that play to your arsenal. Now, to wrap up the vlog here, I will caution you and say that the number one thing in these games when you're considering a 3-bet is, as I said in the beginning of the vlog, you definitely need to consider what your opponent's range looks like when they open, and what types of hands they're going to continue with against you. If a really nitty player opens under the gun and it gets to you on the button and you have ace queen suited, I don't think a 3-bet is going to be the most profitable way to continue against this type of player. A real nitty player's range is going to be very very strong, like pocket 9s plus maybe pocket 10s. They're going to have aces, kings, queens, ace king suited, ace queen. So ace queen's not doing super well against that range. So just really keep in mind what type of player is opening and how they will continue against you, and then you can make a little bit better of a decision as far as whether you should 3-bet or not. So I think that will pretty much do it for the vlog. I hope it was pretty clear for you guys. If not, if you have any questions or want me to comment on anything else about 3-betting preflop, when and why to do it, obviously let me know in the comment section, and I'll try to respond as quickly as I can. But until next time, this is Nick from Arch City Poker. Take care.